Hey there, Goa fans. This is Mark, DJ Solitaire here with episode 80 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I present in every episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement. And the episode today features quite a track. This made a huge impact when it hit in late 96. We're still in the series right now, focusing on tracks from the 96-97 season. And this was a doozy, really different sound. And this was quite deliberate on the part of the artists. They were really focused on taking what it is that they liked from Goa, really giving it a sci-fi angle, and it's kind of real, what I would say cyber rock, but it really comes from industrial, a lot of industrial stuff. Um Frontline Assembly being one of the major influences. And I'm really pleased that the one of the artists from this collaborative project provided a ton of information for this episode. So this is going to be a fun, fact-filled episode of a really influential track by UX, Ultimate Experience. And this is Master of the Universe. So this track made such a huge impression. And there's a lot behind the actual production of it, as well as how the track came out. And Chris Heilvin, who's a dear friend from back in the day, who, after this track came out, moved just a station away from me and was friends with one of those French Dat Mafia guys who lived in my neighborhood. I used to head up to Archway and hang out with him at the time, and I was like, my God, that track, holy moly. And absolutely love this track. Really made a huge impression on me and a lot of folks. Chris, prior to living in Archway near Tufnell Park, where I was living, I lived out near Portobello Road, as did a lot of artists, and there was a lot going on in the area. There's the Space Tribe office, the Tip office, Flying Rhino and Transient were not far either. And so it was really kind of a major hub. And Chris shared quite a few details, which I'm going to read. So I'm going to need my senior citizen glasses over here. Um, so yeah, so really that mixture, as I said, of Goa trance and sci-fi and industrial electronic. I like to say there's kind of quite a futuristic cyber rock kind of sound here as well, but there's a bit of a thrash metal sort of vibe happening also. So they were living, Chris and Pete Martin, with whom he had this project, were living near each other, and once they met up and decided to make music together, Chris took a bunch of his equipment over. Um, Pete had the same big Mackie mixer that Etnica and Simon Posford were using, and they ended up using Roland JD990 and JV1080 with an Akai sampler S3000. And it took a lot of programming. There were great sounds, but it took a lot of programming to make the sounds. And the Rolands, he said, were basically their weapon. Vintage synth, they used vintage synth expansion boards, and that's how it is that they really got what we could say is the UX sound. Um, Now, the track was made in just a few days, and there's a few really cool elements to the track. There's a couple of different spoken samples, and one of them came from a sample CD. And it was a CD that apparently a lot of people were using, and they wanted to do something different. And it was harder to get effects back in the day. So what Chris, Pete decided, oh, well, never mind the CD. And Chris was like, no, 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 let's do something. And he scratched up the CD and then played it. And when they found a cool bit, they sampled it on the Akai sampler. And that bit is where you're going to hear it sounds like a CD jamming. And you hear this guy saying information, and the words start skipping. So that was the good old thing with, CDs, which can never be destroyed, but actually they can, because they can be really damaged if they get scratched, as some of us who scratched beloved CDs unfortunately came to realize. But in this case, the scratching was used for good. and for a very cool effect. So that was deliberate. So then they recorded it with the Akai and used that. So as Chris said, a lot of things were done on purpose by accident, which again, I think is something that's really important to consider, right? I've talked about this a lot before, the use of having the creative process and sort of discovering things by accident and setting out with a certain intention and seeing where you can go with it. So, and then there's that famous sample that the title of the track comes from. I will become master of the universe. Brilliant sample. And, anybody who's been in that, super unified state on the dance floor where you just feel at one with everybody and with everything, and you feel like really fully empowered and in command and so on. Um, it can be a really empowering sample. Now, of course, it can be used to the master of over everyone else. I like to take this in a more uh how shall I say, harmonious sense of, you're the master of your universe and everybody's the master of their universe. And in a sense, master of the universe, mastering how the universe works, right? And mastering to use it for good, which is not exactly how it was in the sample, which is from a 1957 real schlock sci-fi movie called The Brain from Planet Arus. And so I think it's some alien taking over some person who then, wants to use his powers, not so much for good.
A fleet of interplanetary rockets to be armed and manned by your joint military forces, all under my command.
What would you do with all this power?
I will return to my planet Eris, and through its vast intellect, I will become master of the universe. After I'm gone, your Earth will be free to live out its miserable span of existence as one of my satellites. And that's how it's going to be.
So the track was done in just a few days, and then Pete and Chris took it over to the tip office, which I only went in a couple of times. I used to go literally across the hall was the Space Tribe sort of warehouse, sort of where they did the distribution in London. And I had special privileges there and got to go buy things. Not fully wholesale, but getting close. So I was always decked out in sort of new stuff. And so they took it over to the tip office and they were friends with DJ Andre, right, who is I've spoken of before, right? Who wrote that Wicked Wasp track with Sid Shanty and was part of that Hallucinogen Soothsayer remix. And they played it for Andre, and Andre's like, well, that is a track. And then Roger Ramrock walked in and they played it again, and he was like, But in the meantime, soon after that, Dino Saris played it for Darren at Dragonfly. So Darren was taking over Dragonfly after Simon Holton um, moved on to form Twisted Records, which he's still running. And Darren was a really young guy. He's younger than me while he was running Dragonflies. I suspect he was probably about 22 or so at the time, right? And really a great ear and a lovely, lovely fellow. And so Dino played him this track, and Darren is like, "What is this?" And Dino didn't tell him who it was. And then Tsuyoshi got a copy of the track, and then he gave it to Darren, and Darren's like, "Oh my God, who are these guys?" Right? And he finds out who they are, phones them up, and was just super enthusiastic, super like, "Let's get this out. Yes, let's do an album," and so on. And they also arranged a live performance, and their first live took place at Brixton Academy. So that might have been in 96 or so. I'm not sure. It was before I got to London in September 96, because I was not there and I would have been there if I'd known. So the single came out on the later side of 97, sorry, of 96, and the album then came out in mid 97. But the single, I mean, this track was, the peak of this album. I think there's great stuff on the album and really into this, again, this cyber electric sound. And Pete had a couple of really interesting things to say in this very cool interview in Dream Creation magazine that I used to do some writing for as well. And he said their aim is to hopefully create a landscape that people can listen to and dream themselves into in order to experience some very strange happenings. You can create almost any kind of reality and put people in that world. It's sort of music in a way that connects with sci-fi, the future, more wide and forward-thinking stuff than, say, house or techno, which is largely about entertainment. Sci-fi does seem to be the most imaginative form of fiction around. There was also a really cool quote that he had here talking about how, in certain countries, like I said, they're living in sunny countries, the music is a little bit sunnier. And here they are living in this massive city. And consequently, some of our music conjures up apocalyptic images of the future. It's definitely, I kind of got that impression living in London as well. You see the weather. But all of that has fascinating background to one of the most influential tracks, because it was really starting to move away from, just the streamlined cyber, spacey Goa sound, and they're starting to bring in this, industrial rock sound. Now, again, we've had some rock and some guitar stuff already, right? And I talked about how, back in 94, 95, we had, Juno Reactors, Fatima Mansions, the sort of the Loyalizer with some real guitar in there. And then, we had As a Child I Could Walk on the Ceiling, which is coming out in 97. And so, things were starting to move into several different musical directions, which of course was needed. And UX definitely gave this kind of very uplifting but dark nighttime music. And it's that combination, I think, is really, really important and a really key part of the experience. So on that note, how about we get started listening to, it's quite a long track, 9.5 minutes. Let's give this one a listen and pay attention to those, the spoken samples I was talking about, and just absolutely amazing track. So by UX, we've got Master of the Universe. Very cool spacey sounds to start off, right? We're tuning in one of those cosmic radios we've talked about. Or just the rhythm. It's the accenting where that note goes up. Interesting count on how the beats work there. Notice the accent. Love it because it's not on one of the strong beats. It really keeps the momentum going, which is already there from the speed. These laser zaps, right? There's that sci-fi quality. There's some other cool noises going on there. Really, so notice how this is not cheery, happy stuff, but it's really up, right, and really driving. All these chopped up, spacey voices. You really feel like you're in outer space at a very high speed. Wow. And also all these cool voices. We get this great chord that's a really major part of this track, and also really kind of that UX sound. Love the way all these other sounds start playing with it after that initial 8 bars.
I will become master of the universe.
Creative structure. Listen to that. Listen to the way those notes play, right? The way they just bounce up and down. It's brilliant. While there's all these slides and other interjections. I love this gating, right? It really is like you're in and out of these different dimensions. And again, remember, we're listening on smaller systems, and we're listening like this. And you get this on a bigger system, it is just a completely different animal. really broody and moody. And those great sort of science fiction-y whooshes. We just don't get these sounds anymore with newer producers. That drive and that rhythm with that bass line. Now we get a different chord presentation here. Love the accenting. This is absolutely amazing. Love this. Gonna get that skipping sample coming up. And that beautiful interval there. These cosmic ambulances swirling around. Little chord change. Really, chord change that really works, I think. We're gonna come back up. Really, you know, super powerful. I mean, great kind of intensity for something talking about being the master of the universe. More voices. It was a lot harder for them to sample voices and do all of this stuff back then. It's kind of ridiculous to think how difficult it was. How many layers? Right? With the stuff that's harmonic and then the stuff that's just all those other wilder, crazier sounds. And then that all clears away. Storytelling, folks. And it's just not just cut and dried kind of structuring. Building up the tension. We're about 5 minutes into a 9.5-minute track. Kick drops out. Really intervals as well, and again, voice-like quality, right? Old alien voices. This driving voice, this one that's climbing in on that lower level, is really, really key. Really ramping up here. Love the dissonance of that riff, right? It's kind of atonal. It's not like beautiful, sweet melody, right? There's this real kind of clash going on. Each round gets more and more intense. Another key change. Very symphonic and dramatic, isn't it? What a cool time to pull things out, right? So it builds up, and then the kick drops out so it can build up some more. With that bass line. Bit of a Joti Psychaos, sort of similar kind of harmony and rhythm. And this. This triumphant energy here. goosebumps. And all of that, right, that slicing and dicing going on. This is the impact of that chord change at this point. And then this one. Brilliant progressions. Wildness, and it's super sci-fi when you think about it, isn't it? Long climb. Dividing and just lots of vibrating and oscillating. More. It's like, how much more can you take? Here's the climb. Let me get this radio noise. It kind of ends on an unresolved chord. I mean, it's just like, it's just, you think there's more, it's just poof, and it just explodes and it stops. Now, the storytelling is so massive, right? All of those riffs are presented, and then it's just not the whole linear, like there's a build, but the way things, build and then they pull back and then something else is introduced. And the way it ends there, you're not going to beat mix out of a track like that. You have to let that crash go there. And then, there's that radio noise and then, space noise, and then you go into something else. Ideally, I mean, I think personally, I think you're not taking full advantage of the storytelling opportunity that the track provides, and that you're able to provide in sort of the whole story. If you just sort of go, just keep the kick going from another track and blend into it. I mean, you're meant to sort of be like, whoa, what just happened after this track? That's how the storytelling worked on the part of the musicians and the DJs. Right? It was really about the story, and not just, let's just keep the kick going. The kick is really just one part of the story, and there's so much more. And when you stop and you catch your breath, you're just sort of like, wow, you can really start to absorb the experience. And that is what happens neurologically, right? Y'all listen to the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman. He talks about it. You take a break, and that's when the learning assimilates, right? So you study, you stop, and then the learning starts coming in. And so, you dance, stop, and then, your experience actually starts to really come in. It's kind of, makes sense with what's going on in the scene now, and the kick never stops, and except, for a disjointed break in the middle of the track that has nothing to do with anything else. So not a lot to assimilate. But so there we go. What a track. What a masterpiece. Chris just provided a ton of 20 minutes of voice memos from him. And it's really quite, I appreciate it on so many levels, not least because those of you who are active and still in the scene know that Chris has had some really life-threatening medical issues recently, and he was on his way to Paris and for some treatment, which might work. And if it does, he's really got a chance. So, and it was at this time that he's leaving me all of these memos. So, very moving. And if we can all just, hold Chris in our thoughts and send him healing vibes, however it is that we can send them. Chris, thank you so much for this, for sharing your information, for all this brilliant music. And thinking of you, love you. And everyone, let's now listen to, without commentary, the incredible production by UX, Master of the Universe.